there's nothing personal about an awakening. It's not Fred's awakening. It's awakening to the fiction of Fred.
Awareness, the final frontier. These are the explorations of Jonathan Robinson and Brian Tom O'Connor. Their continuing mission, to discover fresh new paths to the mystery within, to seek out new joys and new methods of awakening, to boldly go into the heart of expanded consciousness. This is Awareness Explorers.
Well, welcome, fellow explorers. Brian often makes me laugh right at the beginning of our podcast, and he did a good job today. I'm Jonathan. I'm with my trusty co-host,
Brian Tom O'Connor.
And I am super excited, as I often am when I get to interview a guest explorer. And this is an explorer who I have read, I think, every single thing he's ever written. Of course, he's written a lot, so it may be some new stuff. But let me say some things about Fred Davis. Fred Davis studied and practiced Eastern wisdom for 25 years prior to 2006, when seeking ended and true awakening commenced. He is the creator and editor of awakeningclaritynow.com and the founder of the Living Method of Awakening. Fred is also the author of the non-dual bestsellers, The Book of Undoing, The Book of Unknowing, and The Book of Unveiling, plus Awaken Clarity and Awaken Now. He conducts both public and private sessions online via Skype and Zoom. His website is awakeningclaritynow.com. And he's a fun guy, a wise man, and we are very excited to have him on Awareness Explorers. Welcome, Fred.
Thank you so much. Boy, it's great to be with you, with both of you, I should say. So, Jonathan, I've heard, I did a little research, and so I know something about you guys and what you do, and it feels like you called the wrong number, but but I'm here, so I'll talk.
Good.
This thing started than it is to shut it up.
We want to pick your brain, and having read all your books and seen a lot of your videos on YouTube, certain questions arose, and I get a chance to ask you. And
yeah.
You said in 2006 your seeking ended and true awakening commenced. I'm wondering what happened at that time, and how would you say your life experience changed?
So let me go back a little further than that, and I'll come to 2006. The first awakening here occurred in 1992. It was totally, well, it wasn't, it was spontaneous, but I mean, I was trying mightily. I didn't even know what I was doing, but it turned out I was doing inquiry in my basement, but I didn't know a name for it yet. And there was an awakening, and it lasted, minutes. And then suddenly, ego came in and commandeered that awakening and went, wow, I finally got it. Is it now that I've seen that I am nothing, doesn't that really make me something?
Yes.
And so it was just, the awakening was just paved right over in no time. And I spent a decent part of the next 14 years trying to do what people are trying to do when they come to me, which is get back to that place.
Yeah.
Right? And in 2006, my life was full of misery, and from a logistical sense, and I was trying mightily to escape. And I want to have a loftier ideal for you, but I didn't. I was just suffering tremendously.
Yeah.
And under all of this duress, I was reading lots of books. And one morning, I was reading a book by Ramesh Balsekar called Pointers from Nisargadatta. And he asked a question, and I can't remember it exactly, but it was basically, when everything else is gone, what's left? And for the first time ever, I'd seen that question before. For the first time ever, I actually checked. And when I did, I just started, okay, so the house goes, the world goes, the body goes, the this, that. And all of a sudden, I was like, this? Not, you mean this? Right? And here's the funny thing is I'm not a chakra guy at all, but I just am giving him the report. And it felt like a little BB turned in the very top of my head, like it turned 180 degrees, and I'm guessing unlocked. There was just a locking or unlocking sound to me. I don't know that anybody else in the room would have heard it. And then awake, I came to see who I really was, and which I noticed was exactly the opposite of what I always expected and craved, which was Fred Davis was very, very anxious to know the truth of God. But the truth of God woke up to the fiction of Fred Davis instead.
Mm-hmm.
So it was quite backwards.
So how did that change your, I mean, first of all, did that experience last?
This time, I've never completely unseen anything since the truth since that time, but I have had a lot of confusion. And particularly in the early years, I had a great deal of confusion because there would be identification with the body. So the seeking ended, but boy, re-identification did. Identification did. And when I say seeking ended, it was like, because, okay. Well, the other reason that seeking ended was that when I first woke up, I knew a great deal more than I do now. So there was a lot of undoing that took place for a few years. And the behavior here, I mean, the first thing I noticed when I woke up was that I was inhabiting a maniac. And so with this maniac on the loose, in my awakening fantasies, I always thought Fred was going to wake up, and therefore I thought this body was going to start to behave and think rightly, properly. And that's just not what happened. I noticed that the body did what it did. The mind thought what it thought. And that but I wasn't involved. It was none of my business. So I didn't get what I wanted, but I got something better, which was I didn't get a free Fred. I got free from Fred.
Mm-hmm.
And with that, there was I spent about 3 years in heavy oscillation, sense of being clear, and then a sense of being cloudy, sense of being clear, sense of being cloudy. And the cloudy, I should say, was muddy. I was in deep identification, but I always knew. Still, I was in deep, I could see, but I couldn't feel my way out of that. So, and eventually I called Scott Killaby, and he helped me. I was divesting myself of stories, which is kind of what most of us do as we wake up.
Mm-hmm.
Was coming to see, divesting of, meaning seeing through them. But I had one heavy story left, and Scott Killaby helped me to get that out, and that was, and it was smooth sailing from then on.
What was the story, the last heavy story that he helped you get?
The last story was that I had legal trouble back in the 90s, no, 2000s. Yeah. So I got sober 20 something years ago, and I went and made a lot of amends when I did that. And I was nothing if not sincere. And so I really went and made my amends to people. And, the book says we have to make them. It doesn't say anything about that they have to be accepted. And they weren't. And I ended up in jail. And this was a very difficult situation to get used to. So it was about, instead of going to jail, I went onto to heavy probation for a few years, and I couldn't stand that I couldn't, I just couldn't stand. It felt like my life was over, and it was really, really, really bad. I wanted to die, which is not, I found out, is not particularly uncommon in our community. But my wife, Betsy, had already had a business partner of hers, long-term business partner, shoot himself in the head 2 years prior. And I was there to help clean up the detritus, so to speak. And I had seen what that had done to her, and I didn't have the right to do that. I just knew I didn't have the right to do that to her. So I hated my life, but I loved Betsy more than I hated my life. So, but I couldn't die. I couldn't kill myself. I at one point had it all arranged, but I flew it past her, and I knew that I was going to hit some resistance, but she had just, the problem was that she was just too wise for me. I couldn't get around it, because when I told her, I said, I really just can't take this. I've got to get out of this. And, she said, well, why don't we just give everything a try? And we'll keep this as an option. How do you argue with that? Right? And it was like, no, I'm just going to be difficult just for the fun of it. So I did, and of course, everything unfolded from there. But I woke up about less than 2 months after my hearing.
Mm-hmm.
And it was shortly thereafter that I had something that really helped me a great deal, which was Betsy and I were driving in the car one night to Atlanta. And I was thinking about how this works, that you can't not do what's done, and there's no going back. And then I realized for the first time that people who had, because I was, trying to make myself a victim, and that the people who had gotten me in this trouble, that it was other than me, and the ones who had actually not accepted my amends, I came to see that they had no other choice. They did the only thing they could do. But because the way I look at it is this moment here with you guys, this is the flowering of the inevitable, right? Mm-hmm. And I suddenly saw that if I was going to get off the hook, the only way I could do it was let everybody else off the hook too.
Yeah. That
it couldn't just be, if I was going to claim that everything happens as it does, I've got to give them the same leeway. And I did. And that's kept me from bitterness and all kinds of rotten thinking, which made it much easier.
Uh-huh. We haven't talked much about forgiveness on this podcast, but that is a time-tested method and seems to be important in some cases.
Yeah. In my case, it was very important because I had to forgive me.
Mm-hmm.
And the only way I could do that was to reluctantly free them. And I don't really mean it was reluctant once I saw it, but it was a hell of a lot of reluctance up until that point.
Yeah.
And with that point, there was just openness. Is all I can say. It was like another awakening almost as I was driving. It was just seeing, there's only this, and this cannot be any other way than the way it is. That there's no comparison, there's no alternative, and that they too are the flowering, and everything they do, all of that is the flowering of the inevitable. And I didn't realize it at the time, but I think there was an unconscious decision made at that moment to try to learn to cooperate with the inevitable.
Mm-hmm.
Not that it wasn't required. It was only required if I wanted to not be miserable anymore.
Right.
Who wants to not be miserable?
Yeah, right, exactly.
But it's funny how being miserable is very often an impetus for us to seek the truth, and for some people to find it.
Yeah. It's a tried, I should say it's tried and true. It's been part of spirituality forever. And the other thing that is along that same line that's also tried and true, and which I encourage very strongly, is confession. And I don't mean I just mean telling the truth to somebody about your life, about how relativity is gone. Because one of the first things I noticed upon awakening was that there was actually nothing to talk about. And I've been trying to for 15 years, but I did at least notice that there was nothing to talk about, but there was plenty to talk about in terms of relieving suffering, and my own and everybody else's, because there's no separation there. My suffering is your suffering is my suffering.
But it's such a fascinating paradox to me, because we go into this wanting to end suffering and improve the life for the individual, and it sounds like you're describing awakening as a shift in identification from the individual to the universal. And
yes.
So, and I love you talking about the unit, meaning the individual body and mind. So it's a shift. So that's not really who you are. So is that really what awakening is all about?
Oh no, well, awakening is about that recognition, but the problem is that, well, I'm just going to say it this way, is that many awaken and few clear. Mm-hmm. Many people have that experience, or it may not be, it doesn't have to be angels and trumpets. It's usually not angels and trumpets. It's usually just, oh, or something like that. I mean, I've been with hundreds of people as they woke up. I can speak from experience. And it doesn't have to be a big deal. It can be, but I wouldn't curse anybody with the big deal, because mine was a bit storybook, and it kept me confused for years, because I thought that the throes of that initial awakening, and everything's fine, and the body feels good, and getting back down, identifying as the body feels really good, and this is what seekers do, is that I'm just looking for bliss. But there's nothing personal about an awakening. I'm speaking to the choir, I understand that. But there's nothing personal about an awakening. It's not Fred's awakening. It's awakening to the fiction of Fred. Because even well advanced, spiritual seekers, I hate to say it like this, but there is a gap between, almost everybody ends up with the booby prize, which is that when people come to see me, I have to really talk to them to get them to be humble enough to have me teach them something they think they already know, which is that if there's a Bob that comes to an awakening session with Fred, then by the time you've gotten to me, I mean, you've probably already gone through Rupert and Nadja and everybody else. And, you just get down to the bottom of the bucket, and it's like, well, there's this guy, but I don't know if I'm desperate yet. It's kind of like me with AA. I don't know if I'm that bad yet. So by the time that you get to me, you know a lot. And that's the issue. Because everybody I work with, and just like you two, there are big brains in this, having this conversation right now, and there's big brains listening to this conversation. Nobody else calls me. It's not like I'm finicky about who I talk. Big brains call me, little brains don't bother. And that sounds, well, I'm just going to say it like it is. I mean, it just the smartest people is that's who draw to this, because it just is that way. And
so the obstacle from your point of view of the people you talk to, and probably the people listening, is that their experience of knowing and ideas and concepts are in the way of the simplicity of simple awareness in this moment.
Yes, once in a while. Actually, the first two people that came to awakening while talking to me had never heard the word non-duality, didn't know anything about it, and it was just had no concepts whatsoever, because it was just, I mean, they were both washed in the blood Christians, and we just were having a conversation, and I confess that I did move the conversation to that area, but I think it was really because I'm a one-trick pony. That's what I do anyway. I can't spend any time with anybody without this falling out. But they were very easy to awaken because of that. And I will occasionally get somebody that's new. It'll almost always be a young person, because young people understand the idea of, gee, I'm having trouble with trigonometry. Let me go get a coach. Let me go get somebody who can help me with my trigonometry. And they take a good look at non-duality, and it's fascinating, but it's dizzying. And most will just plow on, but a few will go, you know, I think this might be another area for a coach. And they come here, and I don't have to unteach them. That's the reason my books are named Undoing, Unknowing, and Unveiling, because this is not a teaching, it's an unteaching. Mm-hmm. And when people come to awakening sessions, it's, I say when people come, the first thing is we start out probably backwards than some, which is that when they come up on the screen, the same way that did for you and Brian, is that when they come up on the screen, the only thing I can see is me. And it's almost like a surprise. I swear it's like every time. It's like a surprise. Well, what am I doing coming to this meeting, right? Uh-huh. I know I'm just as awake over there as I am over here. So, and what I'm really saying is I know I'm just as much awakeness over there as I am here. Because that's something that I stress, is that awake and not awake, yeah, they're pointers, but this really sort of point in the wrong direction. Because I'm awake, but she's not, or he's awake, but I'm not, or they're awake, but we're not. All of that is pointing right straight to a unit. And the unit is not going to wake up. I can wake up this water glass just as fast as I can wake up this unit. And that water glass would be just as clever or my body would be no more clever than the water glass if I woke it up. This is a walking cadaver, right? It just is. It's an animated cadaver. And it's the animation that we're talking about, not the cadaver. But we all think it's the cadaver, and it's universal. Mm-hmm. So when a Tom or a Bob comes to me, by the time they get to me, they already know that there's no Tom and no Bob. But the one who knows this is what I call the bubble of self-reflection, and it's where everybody is when they come to me, is that, well, I already know there's no Bob. And in the early part of an awakening session, I know that they're over there just putting up with me and wondering, when is he going to get to the good part? Mm-hmm. But it's all good part. And because the one who knows there's no Tom is Tom. And that's the booby prize of non-duality. Uh-huh. It's only when awakeness comes to see that there's no Tom that we have what we call the shift or the awakening or whatever. And awakening is a misnomer, as you know, because really there's no awakening, because, you are awakeness, and I notice that you do not have the capacity for sleep. So, right? How the hell do you go about waking up awakeness? But what I do understand is that through that sack of conditioning, there's confusion. And through this sack of confusion, probably right. But through this sack of conditioning, there's not confusion of this. There's utter conviction. And I really think that it is utter conviction that plays perhaps the largest role. Because...
What do you mean by that?
in awakening, in an awakening event. And I see, well, many people that are here listening don't know what I do, and what's made me stand out for the last 8 years is that I've backed up myself up to the wall and taken on all comers, which is, if you want to wake up and you're not awake, you don't believe yourself to be awake, then call me next Thursday at 3 and I will wake you up before 4:30, probably before 4. And it's predictable, it's reliable, it happens time after time after time after time. And
well, and I've had that experience with you.
Yeah.
And a lot of people nowadays, as opposed to 20 years ago, can experience with the right method some form of an awakening experience.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So, and a lot of our listeners have had that experience.
Yeah, sure.
But very few people stay in awakeness.
Yeah, because and that's it, is that many awaken but few clear. Clear is what I call coming to a state of near conviction, or a state of acceptance because seeing yourself, it's the most important thing that can happen, but it's the ticket to the dance. It's not the dance itself. This is the dance itself, right? So what happens is that we've had, particularly with Western seekers, we've had awakening on our bucket lists for a very long time. And then so I'm going to get an appointment with Fred Davis, and now that I have seen the truth, it's time to go climb Himalayas, right? Or swim the Amazon, or whatever is next on my bucket list. Mm-hmm. And that's really a precious little value. I mean, it's not of no value, because to see yourself, it's going to be very difficult, just like me in 1992. It's going to be very difficult for you to completely unsee that. Consciously, you may unsee it, but but you have seen it. It's not the individual. It's the animating, the presence over there has seen the truth of itself. Awakeness has come to see, oh, look at this, I'm awakeness. And it's very difficult to completely unsee that. But if we don't follow up on an awakening event, then the likelihood is that we're just going to walk right through it. And it'll become, and I tell people this when I'm down in an awakening session with them, and if you don't pursue this, it's going to you're going to remember this the same way you would remember a nice LSD trip. Right? And I met with Fred Davis. He was really something. He did it for me. He can do it for you.
So what do you suggest for people who have had that initial experience and they want to clear? What can you say to them that might be helpful?
So I would, honestly, what I do say is I ask them, I think one of the real miracles is that when we find a teacher that we can really hear. Because this teaching that I have is not for everybody, but it's for everybody that's drawn to it. And they can hear this. They can't hear, like I had a famous spiritual teacher's media person fly in and spend a weekend with me, because they've been with him for years, and they could see he was incredibly awake, but they just couldn't get it. Mm-hmm. They could not hear that level. And they came to me and boom, right? And one with me an hour. So to hear a teacher is an important thing. So I suggest that if you want to dig a well, my recommendation is not to dig a series of shallow holes. It's not what I did. I went deep I touched on other teachings, of course, but when I woke up, it was after a period of unhealthy following of Eckhart Tolle. And from there, then there came a day when I just couldn't hear Eckhart anymore. Mm-hmm. Right? And what problem is that I knew he was telling the truth, but it's just so, and from that new place, it's just so indirect. It's like, just say it. And when I reached that point, then I found myself following Adyashanti.
Uh-huh.
I stayed with Adyashanti a very long time too. I've talked to him a few times. He doesn't know me from Adam, but he was a really big influence that here. And while I was following Adyashanti, I was kind of dating Byron Katie. And so I didn't really become a Byron Katie follower, but I found that her work, which had been of very limited value prior to awakening, that it was a wonderful clearing tool. And I have lots and lots of people that I recommend. I mean, go to our website and get this.
We had Adya and Byron Katie on the podcast before, and they're, as you know, both incredible.
Yeah, right, exactly. And they helped me a great deal.
Mm-hmm.
So I have not, and their pictures are up on a shelf right here in my room.
Yeah.
So it's, I owe them a debt, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
And it's something that, and Eckhart, my God, he was so patient I never met him. He didn't know he was being patient, but he patiently talked to me for years as I worked myself through a total fog, because I had been a Buddhist prior to that.
Uh-huh.
And that's what I assumed that I was going to do. I quit all spiritual seeking deliberately for the 1 year that I got sober, because I wanted to go in the same way that I would recommend people coming into this teaching, which is I wanted to go into AA. I didn't want to go as a knower, because I had been to AA before as a knower, and what I had noticed was I didn't get sober.
Hmm.
So this time I said, okay, what if they're right? I mean, it's crazy, but what if they're right? So I went in there and I just took everything I knew and left it at the door. And I didn't want to practice Buddhist spirituality, because I didn't want to fix what they had. Because what I knew was that I'd fixed what they had before and I'd gotten drunk. So I just did AA the way that the AA guys said to do it. And with complete abandon. I mean, that's the reason I went to jail. Most would not have gone to jail. They would have made these amends that put them in jeopardy.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I wouldn't even recommend anybody do it. So I'm not recommending it now if you have the alcohol and in the steps.
Do you think doing the 12 steps helped with your awakening, or did you see that as a slightly a different track?
I do see it as a different track, but I also see it as that it was, if you are a drunk, a hopeless drunk, like I was, who finally gets, for many, many years, I could quit drinking anytime I wanted to. I just noticed I never wanted to. And when I got to the point where I wanted to and I couldn't, that's when I went to AA. And if you go in there a drunk and you actually stop being a drunk, become a former drunk, if you will, that process that you go through, because the process is all about surrender. And I got my own views about that now, but it is a surrender process. And it was like awakening light, like enlightenment light. There is a complete shift. It's a very important spiritual shift. It is in its own category. I don't know anything about it. All I can tell you is I can report that for me, at the time, I knew that I had had a spiritual experience. But even then, I suspected that this ain't really it.
Yeah.
Because much of that was around getting your life back in order, and the gratitude that comes from having been an outcast drunk to becoming a citizen. And so there's a lot that's very practical in that. So I would recommend it for anybody who's having a drink or drug problem. I can't tell you that it's going to work for you, because any kind of recovery method has pretty low odds. But I went at it with full abandon, and it did work for me, and it worked for my wife, because I had her in AA. I passed her a note in an AA meeting one night, just like you would in grammar school.
I love what you said about asking the question, what if they were right? And I find that that applies actually to non-dual teachings, because I don't think you have to believe a dogma. But if you ask the question, well, what if they were right? What if, and one of my favorite phrases of yours, what if it's true that there's only one thing going on?
Right. Have you tried
What would that mean?
Yeah.
Who would I be if that were true?
That's right. That's it. And I've started a couple of videos often with, okay, let's just pretend that I'm actually telling you the truth.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And I know it's absurd, but I really don't have any great motivation for doing this other than to just try to help you suffer less. Because I don't think we ever look at that. What we think is that when they say you are when they told me that I was the awake space, then I went looking for the awake space, right? Because I knew that I didn't know exactly which awake space they were talking about, but I was very confident I knew what awake space they weren't talking about, which was this one. But I've since had people count how many awarenesses they can find, and it inevitably comes down to one, right? And I can notice the same thing with space. This was a world of objects for which space was what divided everything from everything else. And now, at least within oneness, the space is the glue that holds everything together. It doesn't separate anything.
Oh, what a great analogy that is. Yeah, what a great redefinition of space, too. Yeah. I love that, yeah.
So, and what you can do to help people see that sometimes, and your audience can try this, is I just have them notice whatever room you're in. So take a look around the room and look at all the objects in the room. Just glance at them. We're not talking about big stares. And let that sit for a second, and then just go back over the very same space, the very same room, and look about. And this time, instead of focusing on the objects, focus on the space. And once they've done that, then I ask them, okay, so what I want you to do now is I want you to take all of that space and I want you to turn it into Jell-O. And they do, and I say, how many Jell-Os do you have? Do you find? And it's a very good way of seeing, because it is almost like seeing oneness, right? I mean, which I can't see itself, but it does bring about, there's a visceral sense of experiencing the boundlessness of the space that you are.
I love that technique. I look forward to trying that. That's going to be fun.
Very effective. So another great technique, which you may know, but if you don't, it'll be great for your listeners as well, is that you can look at an object in the room, any object, and then what I have them do is tell me what the object is and how far away it is from the body. And they will say, well, it's a vase and it's 8 feet from the body. And I said, okay. Now, I want you to look at the vase, and then I want you to just look at it. Don't just stare at it. Just look at the vase, and then I want you to tell me where the looker stops and the looked at begins. Just point that out for me. And what you discover is it just a single continuum. So this seeing that you can't draw a line, you come to see, again, viscerally, that there's just one thing going on, and space is the glue. It's not, and this is the thing about, you can come to understand the paradoxes of space and time and all that more easily because, how far is my hand from the mug when there is just when the space is the glue. It's the same thing. There's no such thing as distance. And that's the truth, is that distance is a hoax. And, it's pretty effective. And I'm not giving up my automobile, but I noticed that doing this helps you to bring about the actual experience. Because what I found out is that sitting around and talking about enlightenment actually doesn't work very well.
Mm-hmm.
And if it did, millions of people would be awake who are not. And what actually works is not to tell somebody about it, and I could tell about my wonderful experience. Who cares? What about me? Right? So I actually take you there and show it to you. And just like with some of these things that we've done here.
Mm-hmm.
And there is the experience of, oh, I'm not awake. I'm awakeness. And that changes everything, because now we're not looking at the unit anymore. I'm awakeness. What is that? I have no idea. It's a code word that we both agree to so that we can come here and try to talk about that which we can't talk about. But we can say, awakeness, and that's the same thing as that thing we feel like you can't talk about, but it's like So, because if we awaken, not awake, I still use the terms, but they're tragically unskillful.
Yeah, they kind of lead us down a wrong path in a certain way.
Oh,
they make a verb a noun.
Thank you. That was one of the first things I noticed when I woke up, is that I went, oh my God, I'm a verb and not a noun.
Yeah.
And what I had done, and I had listened to Eckhart for years, and for a moment there was, oh, Eckhart, why didn't you tell me? And right, and out of all those time I spent with you, why didn't you tell me? I thought about how Eckhart said over and over and over again how he spoke of being. See, but I was thinking X being, human being, animal being, some being. I took the verb that he was offering up and turned it into a very, very subtle noun.
Yeah.
And then went chasing that. The same way when they told me, well, Fred, the truth does not come and go. So I'll find out when he finds it, right? I went looking for an object that doesn't come and go. Well, that can be a long journey,
Yeah.
So what I've discovered is that authentic spirituality works exactly 180 degrees away from the way we think it does. And it starts right out at the very beginning, which is that we expect the unit character to wake up, and it's awakeness that wakes up to the emptiness of the unit character.
Yeah.
But that was my tip. I had been awake so to speak, for about 5 years. And then one evening I was sitting in my 6 years. And one evening I was sitting in my seat and sitting in my chair in the living room, and I had a vision, and I won't go into it. Not that it's bad, it's just a vision, who cares? The end result of the vision was that what I could see, there were people on my staircase that suddenly turned to bones. And the message that came just so loud and so clear was, oh my God, all the seekers, let me use the words that came. All of the pilgrims are dying on the way to God. And virtually nobody's making it. And then crazy notion that came out of my head was, what we should do is, oh, I see, we need to wake them up first, not last. Because last doesn't come. Later doesn't come. I'm going to wake up soon. I've sat with dozens of seekers who have been I'm just missing that one little piece, right? And then, but I've been following the path really, really stringently. And how long have you been following the path? Well, 40 years. Well, if you've been following a path for 40 years, are you sure that's a path? Because it looks like a wild goose chase to me.
So how do you take away that sense of future hope that keeps people on a hamster wheel?
Well, when you enter into that agreement, when you come to an awakening session, awakening sessions last 90 minutes, and
you're going to do it now. You got 3 minutes, buddy.
That's right. Yeah, you got 90 minutes. How you doing so far? And it puts pressure, and that's what monasteries put great pressure on their monks, where you got to work all the time. You don't get much to eat, and you got to, when you're not working, you're going to be singing or something like that, or meditating in Zen.
Can you tell by how do you tell in a session when someone's woken up? Do you tell by, is it self-reported, or you can tell by looking at them, or is it just a sick?
Well, you can. I can all of the above. All of the above. It's most people will. I don't have to do any sort of pointing, but if I'd have to do pointing, I would say. So you notice that you probably heard the stories that the seeker doesn't wake up. You heard that? Yes, I have. And now you can begin to see that's true, because there's something here that's waking up, but it's not Bob, is it? And you come to see, it's not that you're awake and you've been failing to be awake until now. It's the fact that you've been awakeness all along and you're just now noticing it. And awakening session is what I consider, I'm not pushing awakening session, I'm just telling you what I do. And awakening sessions are a place, it's a very safe and comfortable place to tell yourself the truth. Because let's face it, awakeness is in denial. That's what's happening. And I bet I have, I don't have a folder, but if I did have a folder it would be this wide, thick, full of emails, next day emails, or even that same day emails from people who've gone through an awakening session and written me back and said, "Thank you for calling me on my shit."
Yeah, we don't have that so much in the community, the non-dual community. It really is needed. Calling on our shit, seeing our blind spots, seeing the stuff we need to clear.
Right.
And actually, I teach methods like that.
Oh, good.
And they've helped me. And I wish that was more part of the group of people trying to awake, because I think it would accelerate everything.
Oh, it certainly would. Listen, when somebody pays me for an awakening session, then that is, I consider that to be my permission to do what they ask me to do.
Yeah.
And I will do that as sweetly and gently as possible. But if it takes me grabbing you by the shirt and shaking your ass, then that will happen too. And that's and when it happens, I mean, this unit goes nuts. I mean, because it's just like, who is this? What is this? But it's just, that's because, and it's not with the person. It's awakeness becoming impatient with ego.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's just like, come on, right? And that does count, and it's the same thing with awakening sessions. With clarity, with people that come after me with regular talks, is that I will tell them, I hate it, but I got to tell you the truth because I know it, and I don't think it's going to be what you want to hear, but I got to do that. You see,
yeah.
But are you talking about the truth about like their habits in life, or about the fact that they are looking for an object? I mean, about the truth in relation to how they're looking at awakening and awakeness.
Well, let me give you an example.
Yeah.
Just prior to you guys, I was in what I call a clarity session, which is a 1-hour session with no agenda, and with a guy in California who has really been through the mill. he's went through throat cancer with him, and now he's having other difficulties. And, he had an operation as he was trying to get better from his throat cancer. He had to have this, that. I mean, it's just really been it's like I sent him the book of Job, right? Stephen Mitchell. Yeah, I love Stephen Mitchell. And I sent that book to this guy. But anyway, just before we were talking here, and I said, I know that you're sitting over there, you're in a lot of pain. And he is, and has been for going on 2 years, not there yet. And I said, but you can't tell yourself that when you can, but it will just induce suffering. I know what the feeling is over there, which is, why me? Why me having all this pain and this and that and the other? I mean, for God's sake. This was not the plan. And then and I said, the only response to that is, why not? Mm-hmm. Because in your mind, this happened with me. It's all from my own experience. I had sciatica for years, terrible sciatica, and it was really bad. And I couldn't stand for more than 15 minutes at a time. And I had a job that required me to stand. So I was just in agony while I was, as a bookseller, going to book sales and stuff. And sometimes I would actually go from table to table on my knees. And one day I was sitting around my kitchen table by myself, and I was sitting there thinking, why me? And even though I know there's no me here, that was still the call of the day. Why here? And it came back, why not? And suddenly I realized, oh, hell, this is my job. See, in my mind, this was somebody else's job. My job was to be the comeback kid and build a life and do all this and be, happy forever and all this stuff. It didn't include this shit. Well, that was my plan, but it wasn't the plan. Not that there's really a plan, but there's an unfolding inevitability. And part of that unfolding inevitability was the fact that the Fred unit had chronic acute pain. And that was part of your daily experience. And I realized that somebody had to do it. It's hard to recognize, but the world can't be other than the way it is. And this is relativity. So there's a balancing. And, what I thought was, well, damn, I think I paid my dues up to now, right? And I think I'm all paid up on the suffering part, but I was wrong.
Yeah.
Because what I notice is so long as you resist suffering, there will be a trap door. Just when you think, I can't take any more of this, there'll be a trap door, and it's like, the next thing I'm wishing for is the terrible experience I just was having a minute ago. It's like I had a friend of mine in Portland jumped off the bridge and broke both legs, right? When he hit that water and broke both legs, the only thing he wanted was the same miserable life he had when he was at the top of the bridge. And because he lived through it, and I know. So recognizing that I was not special, that I wasn't the anointed one who was not supposed to have chronic acute pain. That in matter of fact, it was my job as a unit. I'm not speaking from unitness in the sense that I could see that it was the Fred unit's job to suffer in this physical pain. And I have to tell you, I'm not trying to give out a magical recipe because it probably won't work for everybody, but my sciatica did not go away. But it was better because I just simply quit struggling against it. And my sciatica was, a lot of it was psychosomatic. And by the giving up of the fight, then that giving up really helped, really made a difference. It was an appreciable difference in that 5-minute span, if you will, from the beginning of it.
Yeah, Fred, I had a similar experience with back pain, so I know what you're talking about. And really, it works on every level. If you give up fighting your emotional pain, it changes.
Yeah.
And
See, I have a little different take on surrender than most people. I had a traditional view of surrender because I went through AA, all of that, and it was, and I'm surrendered, I'm surrendered, I'm surrendered. But as time has gone now, I recognize that there's no one here to surrender to God. So that ain't going to happen. So what is it that actually happens when it feels like there's someone here who has surrendered to God? And that's really happening is that divinity is simply surrendering to relativity. Here it is. And there's just
you stop resisting what is.
You stop resisting what is because you recognize, well, I mean, this is it.
Mm-hmm.
This is it. And that me struggling against with what this is the we could say that this present moment is sort of an outgrowth of past moments, if we'll just go there for the moment. And it can't not be. It just, right? I mean, it just is. Because, see, I was powerless before going to, well, I was powerful before I went to AA. And then AA taught me that I was powerless over alcohol. And then I learned that I was powerless over everything else, too. And when I learned that lesson, then it was like, I'm powerless. I'm not in control here. I'm not running this thing. So, what I noticed is actually, hell, I'm the unborn. I'm very deeply upset about a world I'm not even in, right? You get that?
Yeah.
And it was, right. So it was, coming to identify as the unborn, and that, we want to be careful because we'll build up a story around that too.
Right.
But it's a much lighter, freer story than the other one. Yeah. And you realize, well, I don't have any choice because what am I playing at that I don't accept this? I've already accepted this. I've already accepted every single bit of it exactly as it is, or it wouldn't be here. Mm-hmm. So, and now this one is saying, well, I see your point, but.
But I have a problem with this particular thing.
That's it.
But it also still thinks it's the unit that has to do the accepting, as opposed to noticing that there's something else that's already accepted.
So noticing that, because of what this does is this again, we were talking about, why don't you stay away? Because awakening is not a one-time deal that we have, and it was what we all wanted, was the one-shot awakening. And then now, I mean, when I woke up the second time, I mean, I thought the first words out of my mouth were egoic, even though it just woke up, it was just ignorance. But, and it was like, well, Buddha never got here. That's the first thing I thought.
Uh-huh.
Because how could there's nobody ever seen this, right? So taking ourselves less seriously than that. I have a story, because this teaching, as Nisudata would say, that this is a guy that taught every day for 30 years, without break. But at the same time, he would look at you, that was his actions, but he would look at you and say, gurus come, gurus go. I notice not much changes. Mm-hmm. But I have a story, just like he did. I have a story that this is an important teaching. And that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. Although I realize that's only within relativity, that from the standpoint of the absolute, it comes and goes. I mean, I just noticed that it will not have that much impact.
Yeah, having that light attitude really helps. We're getting short on time. I'm wondering if this is a good time. I know you have a guided meditation, and I often listen to your guided meditations and really enjoy them. Would you be willing to treat our guests to that?
You bet. And this guided meditation will present to you the very heart of this teaching. Try it. What if it helped? We can just sit in our chairs, or in our beds, or on our sofa, and just allow the body to relax, just as much as it wants to. But if it doesn't want to relax, that's not a requirement either. Just be as you are. Now I want you we're going to use the body as an anchor. In the same way in this teaching we use logic until we get to the point where we have to throw logic out the window. We use the unit to move beyond the unit. We use the brain to move beyond the brain. And in this instance, we're starting out using the body. And if you sit still, it's best with your eyes closed. I think it's much easier. But just notice that there's an aliveness here. And what do I mean by that? I mean there's a sense of existence. There is a sense of being. I call this the sense of being meditation. So notice that there's a sense of being. Let's also notice that it's just a sense. I can't even honestly tell you that I am, because that's not the experience here. The experience is there's a sense of being. Only. And what you can notice is that you can feel it in the body. You can feel what's animating that cadaver. It may show up as a tingling. It's usually very easy to notice in the hands. But once you begin to notice it, you'll notice it's very difficult to not notice it if you're engaged. So it may show up as a tingling. It may show up as a vibration. There may be a purely energetic feel to it. But the sense of being is always here. There actually can't be a here in the absence of the sense of being. Now let's notice our eyes. Don't take your attention away from feeling that. I've found it that it's also that the sense of being can be noticed in the natural world. I notice it in a cat purr. I notice that cicadas have exactly that same vibration. I've noticed it in numerous ways that don't come to me right now. But I can also tell you that it's the same rhythm as Om, Om. Hear that Om. And that's the sense of being shown up as vibration. The Hindus tell us that that was the first divine sound. I cannot disagree with them. Notice that as you put attention on attention, because this is what we never do, we always use our attention to look out at the world. We use our attention to look out at the content of this arising. And this is the practice of taking the same attention and putting it on attention. And it may feel like this is my attention, but if you investigate, I don't think you'll be able to find an owner of attention. But the one thing that attention never does is it never pays attention to itself. So this is the turning of attention. We're using it, and it's going sort of behind itself. Because if you notice, attention that's your looking tool. And this looking tool is what you look for, your socks, your keys. And this attention, I'm just going to suggest, I've never had anyone argue with me about this, that another word or definition, decent definition of attention would be focused awareness. So when you bring attention to rest upon awareness, the first thing attention notices is that attention has been looking for attention. Awareness has been looking for awareness. Oneness has been waiting on the other oneness. Notice now the body. Notice the tingling. Notice the electricity. However it's playing out for you, vibration. Look for it in your fingers and your hands, but I bet most of you can feel it over your entire bodies. And now what I would like you to do is notice that it doesn't stop at the body. You put skin under an electron microscope, and it really becomes impossible to point out where skin ends and space begins. There is no hard line. Any good physicist can tell you this. So what I want you to do now is noticing that the sense of being is actually not confined to the body and actually doesn't have anything to do with the body other than to animate it. Try to find a boundary. Look for a boundary. Notice that your eyes are still open, but they're just seeing what? There's just a dark field. Are you other than this dark field? There is no separation of any kind anywhere. Thank you.
Thank you.
A little.
Lovely.
Beautiful.
Take a moment to come back to Earth.
Yes. And
You threw in everything, including the kitchen sink, into that one.
I did. Well, I got one shot at your audience. So, I threw out my best stuff.
Yeah.
And then everybody's always waiting for my best stuff, but I never hold it back. All this stuff is my best stuff.
It's all the best stuff. That's the whole thing with this non-duality thing.
That is. That's right. What
It's all good stuff.
The Zen monk who woke up and someone asked the butcher for his best cut of meat, and the butcher answered, "Every cut of meat is my best cut."
Well, I'm so happy that our listeners got the best cut of Fred,
Yeah.
or of beingness,
Yeah.
of awakeness.
I call it Fredness.
Fredness.
There's no Fred here, but there's a lot
There's
of
no Fred here. There's a lot of Fredness, right? And
I'm-
Brianness and Jonathanness are grateful.
Yeah. I'm grateful to you for giving me this opportunity. Really, it's been wonderful.
Yes.
You have a way of putting things, Fredness, that have been personally really helpful to me, and I just want you to know that.
Thank you very much, John. Like I used to say, just say it. That's what is happening here.
Mm-hmm.
It's very direct, to the point.
Yeah. Yep. People want to find out about you. Your website's awakeningclaritynow.com. A lot of great stuff on your website and YouTube as well.
Thank you. Yeah, you go to just if you go to YouTube, and so all you have to do is Google Fred Davis or Fred Davis spirituality, Fred Davis anything along those lines. You'll get a zillion hits.
We have like 70 some odd episodes at awarenessexplorers.com, including lots of meditations from the likes of Fred Davis, Aja, Byron Katie, and all kinds of people. And you can support us on Patreon at patreon.com/awarenessexplorers. And most important of all, keep exploring.
Keep exploring.
Thank you for listening to Awareness Explorers. To learn more, you can check out our website at awarenessexplorers.com. Please subscribe to our podcast on your favorite podcast app. We'd love it if you would post a review. And please share our link on Facebook and with family and friends, because knowing yourself as awareness is the greatest gift you can give yourself or someone you love.